Link's Awakening was recently announced for the Nintendo Switch. Okay, it wasn't recently at all. Is that what you wanted to hear? Are you happy now? Yes, this is a true Redkwan video. The awkward middle ground between news and reviews that comes out either way too late or years before anyone would care to become something useful to nobody. But back to the very recent announcement of Link's Awakening for the Switch. The fact that Link's Awakening is coming shows a lot about what Nintendo wants to do with Zelda going forward, including their thoughts on the future of 2D Zeldas, 3DS support, their thoughts on remakes, and maybe even something about the next major Zelda game. So what does this all mean? And is what it all means the right thing that should be the thing that it means? All your questions will be unsatisfyingly answered as I state obvious facts and completely unfounded and wild speculation with almost no interesting analysis to speak of. It's gonna be a fun ride. Hello all 1,378 of you, I'm Redkwan, and is Link's Awakening the right step for the Zelda series? So first, let's start off with what this actually means for Zelda. Well, firstly, it means that 2D Zeldas probably aren't going anywhere. This may seem obvious to people because Nintendo has made 2D Zelda since the beginning of Zeldas, but I was curious about it, seeing as there hasn't really been 2D Zeldas on Nintendo consoles since Nintendo consoles could play games in 3D. So they really just existed on Nintendo's handhelds, where 3D Zeldas wouldn't have worked as well, or in some cases, at all. I thought maybe the 2D Zelda team would morph into the 3D team to get big games done quicker, or might move on to new projects that worked on other games, and Nintendo would just leave their handheld style games in the past. But apparently, at least for smaller projects like this, they're here to stay. And it shows a good amount about the 3DS. This doesn't really have to do with the future of Zelda, except that it probably won't have anything else on the 3DS, but you have to imagine that if Nintendo thought the 3DS was still relevant going forward, that they would have put this game on there. It's a top-down 2D Game Boy remake. That's the kind of stuff the 3DS has been living off of for the past year or two. Also, this shows that Nintendo is all for remaking all the Zelda games. Obviously, they've remade most of the 3D ones already, so maybe this isn't some sort of huge revelation, but the fact that they're now starting to remake 2D Zeldas means that we can probably expect remakes of other 2D Zelda games in the future. And it might also give some hints about the next 3D game. I think the next 3D Zelda is probably going to be similar to Breath of the Wild, but I think the fact that they're waiting 2 years might be a little important. A lot of people were speculating that the next Zelda games would come out relatively quickly, like only a few years after Breath of the Wild, and would just reuse a lot of those assets. But I think the fact that we're getting a major 2019 Zelda game, probably later 2019, probably means that we won't be getting another major Zelda for at least another 2 years after that, which means that the asset reusing Zelda game idea probably isn't happening. Maybe I'm looking too far into this, and I'm not sure if anyone thinks that anymore anyways, but well, there you go. So it looks like that's kind of the direction that Zelda is heading, based off this announcement. 2D Zelda games probably aren't going anywhere, we're probably going to be getting a lot of 2D remakes in the future, and there most likely won't be a Breath of the Wild asset using game. Also, the 3DS is totally dead. I don't know why I'm talking about this because it's really not relevant. But to be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about this future. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm really happy that Link's Awakening is coming because I haven't played it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But at the same time, I'm not sure I still want 2D Zelda games from Nintendo in 2019. That's not to say they aren't good, and I'm sure they take a lot fewer resources to make, but I still feel like I would rather get 3D Zeldas more often than 2D Zeldas once in a while. And I know there's all this technical stuff, they're a specialized team, so they wouldn't really be able to help with 3D Zeldas or whatever. But I mean, I think they can figure something out. Do top-down first-party games really still have a place on the Switch? I honestly don't know. Based on what I've seen from people, it seems to have been mostly received well, besides some complaints about the art style, because people are just really petty. Some people just complain about the smallest little things. But yeah, I think people have generally been pretty happy about the announcement, which means that maybe 2D Zelda games do still have a place. I do have to wonder if the reception would have been different if it was a completely new Zelda game in this style though. It would be interesting to see. As for the remake part of things, I'm still a little conflicted too. On the one hand, I think Zelda games are fantastic, and the more people who can play them, the better. And a lot of games are old enough to where it would be very useful to remake them, but there are so many ports on the Switch that Nintendo has just kind of made me look down on any sort of old game coming back. And that's lame, because Wind Waker HD is what got me into Zelda, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. But Nintendo releases so many of them now, and I think they do slow down the releases of new games, so I'm not sure how I feel about them. As for the fact that there probably won't be a game that uses the assets of Breath of the Wild, I'm honestly kinda happy about it. Majora's Mask in a game is a really cool idea, but with a game like Breath of the Wild, where so much of what the game is just the world, it doesn't really make sense to pull something like that, I don't think. I mean, I don't really want to play another game in that world, especially when I didn't even like it the first time. I just crunk and went there. So is Link's Awakening the right step for Zelda? Well, it's not exactly the step I would have probably chosen, seeing as I would like to see more 3D Zeldas instead, and Nintendo has soured me on ports like the dastardly fiends they are, but I don't think it's a bad direction either. The game looks like a lot of fun, and I personally haven't played it, plus 2D Zeldas are still fun games, and remaking some of the 2D Zeldas could do a lot to improve these old classics. There are probably a good amount of people who have played it who would still be excited to play it again, and there are probably a ton of people who haven't played it, like me, Redkwan, who will now be able to experience for the first time the twist that Link was actually a stepfather the whole time. Well, I'm Redkwan. Do you think Link's Awakening is the right step for Zelda? Did I lower your expectations enough in the beginning that you actually thought this video was passable? I'm trying to learn some fun psychological manipulation tricks that I can use on my viewers. Oh, really? Yeah, my lawyer says to disregard that last part. Anyways, I'm Redkwan, thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.